series of gaps thus made marked the start line for one of the most dramatic armoured battles of the last 40 years. The breaching of these ramparts, which are considerably lower than they used to be, and the bridging of the Suez Canal with pontoons was the work of military engineers who opened the way for their victorious army. Military engineers are the men who make warfare possible. They are the builders of obstacles. Here, the Israeli engineers who constructed these ramparts. And they're the destroyers of obstacles. In this case, the Egyptian engineers who cut clean through these defenses. The engineer will be in the vanguard of any army, for a general may have as many troops as he wants, as much equipment, as many guns or tanks, but if he cannot keep them moving forward over broken ground, shattered roads, through obstacles, and above all, across those waterways that cut through almost any battlefield, then he cannot win. It's the engineer who opens the way. Sand ramparts are but the latest in a long succession of military obstacles which the sapper has learnt to overcome. He is also, of course, their inventor. Today, there is the explosive mine, and also a different problem, the blown bridge. 200 years ago, the sappers' devices were simpler, but they had their own deadly effectiveness. The hand-scattered caltrop, which left one spike sticking upwards however it fell, was a cruel menace to cavalry. The chevaux de frise, spikes revolving on a rigid frame, could disembowel attacking infantry. Later armies would adapt barbed wire as a barrier to infantry assault. Sappers were behind all these things. They were also behind their antidotes. The Bengal sappers and miners of the British Indian Army invented the first antidote to barbed wire, called the Bangalore torpedo. It was a pipe filled with explosive, which could blow a gap through an entanglement. Many brave sappers died at the start of the First World War, attacking barbed wire with explosive, until the ever-growing depth of entanglements and the weight of fire covering them made Bangalore torpedoing pointless. In the end, the appearance of the tank solved the problem of gapping barbed wire. The obstacle that replaced it was the mine. The mines developed in the Second World War, whether anti-tank or anti-personnel, worked on the same principle. A thin casing contained an explosive charge, large enough to blow off a tank track or small enough to destroy a man's foot, as desired. A fuse detonated the charge when it itself was activated by a chosen degree of pressure. So, for example, the anti-tank mine would not go off merely when walked on. The fused mine was usually buried just beneath the surface of the soil and the digging disguised. At the beginning of World War II, the sappers acquired a tool that would pinpoint the target, an electronic device that would detect the metal in a mine even when it was buried. Mine clearing nevertheless remained one of the most dangerous jobs in warfare.
You go to the site where the marker or someone had been blown up and commence to sweep for mines with your mine detectors until something buzzed in your ear, and then you would stop and your number two would deal with it, and you carry on like that until you cleared a way through.
I was afraid, very afraid. Everybody was. The feeling of fear was the stomach churning over, wanting to yawn. And you could tell your friends were just as afraid as you because they were yawning and giggling at silly things. But it was a thing that had to be controlled, because if you're lifting mines and they're looking for booby traps, and you had to control your fear. You were still afraid, but the worst part of fear was waiting to go and do the job.
When I was wounded, it was up in Tilburg. We were clearing for shoe mines, which you can't detect because there is only one metal part in, which is a firing pin. And we used to prod for these with a steel instrument of some description. I used to use a German bayonet. And, well, as I was prodding, there was just this huge explosion. Blew me back and couldn't see, couldn't hear, knew nothing.
In the Falklands, many of the minefields have had to be left uncleared, the ground too soft for armoured vehicles, and the plastic mines themselves too difficult and dangerous to detect by hand.
C3B, okay? Okay. The most common of the anti-personnel mines are these, solid TNT inside, simply fused by screwing the pressure fuse on top of the mine. And sadly, over the last 3 days, 2 of my soldiers have lost feet on these very mines.
And the latest antidote to the minefield, the giant Viper, a rocket-propelled explosive hose, the modern sapper's adaptation of the Bangalore torpedo. The demands of mine clearing are one of the factors which have turned the sapper, like all modern combat soldiers, into an armoured warrior. One of his armoured tools is the mine plough. Others are even more ingenious. Oldest of the sapper's armoured vehicles is the bridging tank. Armies come to a halt when they reach an unfordable river or a blown bridge. The latest tank, with a scissors bridge, can throw a trackway over a water obstacle in a few minutes. When an army hits a larger river, the sapper's traditional response is to improvise a bridge of boats or pontoons, like these French sappers replacing a bridge blown by the retreating Germans in 1914. But the technique is hardly new. When the Persian Emperor Xerxes invaded Greece in the 5th century BC, he bridged the Hellespont, separating Asia from Europe, with 2 spans of pontoons. Each comprised, the historian Herodotus tells us, 300 ships, lashed together with cables of flax and papyrus. The bridge of boats remained the sapper's chief means of improvising a water crossing for over 2,000 years. Caesar took pontoons to Gaul. Napoleon escaped from Russia across a pontoon bridge. These are believed to be German cadets learning pontoon bridging on the Rhine just before the First World War. Technology has transformed the pontoon, like much other sapper equipment, but not made it obsolete. This bridge, being built by Royal Engineers across the River Weser in Germany, has M2 pontoons as its components. The M2 is a road vehicle that floats and keeps station when driven into the water, unfolds a trackway and locks into its neighbor. Sappers are not always in the vanguard of an army, but a moment must come when the cry from the ranks is, "Follow the sapper," when the need to get forward is most urgent. It is the cry of an army in attack, when the way forward must be opened, and only the sapper can do it. Clearing the way usually means leading the way, so the sapper must often work under direct enemy fire, unable to take cover until his job is done.
The most frightening work of a sapper, I would say, is building bridges under fire. The reasons being that mostly you haven't got enough time. You're usually harassed by mortar fire or machine gun fire. Sometimes not when there's heavy smoke around you, but usually you are harassed. And the speed and the danger at night of strapping your fingers is very, very bad. I've known fellas lose fingers through when you're putting the Bailey panels together, and not their fault. You shout to the pin man, drive the pin. He brings up the panel which you engage into the other panel too, and it snaps down to your fingers off.
Once it became dark, it was a little easier, but then the Germans had moved a machine gun up along the riverbank, and they couldn't see us at night, but they could hear us. And so as we put this military meccano together, and it's a noisy business, you can't put the panels together. It says you must treat the bridge carefully and hit it with hide-faced hammers. We used to hit it with 14-pound sledges, because under pressure, you get that bloody pin in, you see. And it was inevitably noisy, and they could hear us. So the thing sort of inched forward through the night by men. Each piece of the bridge, I mean, a Bailey Bridge panel takes 6 men to lift it, so 6 men would pick it up and try and get it on quickly. And if they were fired at, they would lie down because there was a parapet that gave some sort of protection. And they would hit the bridge with hammers lying down so that the Kraut could hear the noise, and he would fire away merrily. And then hopefully he'd reach a point where he'd have to change the belt on his gun, and then we could get the panel on. And it was like that, edging forward through the night.
For secrecy and the hope of a little protection, bridging in the face of the enemy is usually done at night, with the heavy, sharp and complicated equipment often assembled by touch alone. This bridge has been built under cover of darkness in 2 hours. Once the armoured brigade that is to use it has crossed, it will be disassembled and the parts returned to the bridging column until next needed. Bridges imply roads. The Roman legionaries, who were all trained as engineers as well as infantrymen, built the first comprehensive road network in the world. Its purpose was military, but its effect was to make a continent into a single political entity. This Roman road in Britain leads north to Hadrian's Wall, and south to a line with another in France, which connected Gaul with the Balkans, and so across the Hellespont to end on the Roman frontier in modern Iraq, 2,500 miles away. The pace of a campaign often demands that roads, like bridges, have to be built in a hurry. But bridge laying is child's play compared to road engineering. For this, enlisting local labor, the sappers must hack and cut and dig. They must work like navvies themselves. They must teach people to make a road who perhaps have never even seen one. This is the building of the Burma Road, driven over trackless mountains to save China from Japanese conquest in 1942. The military engineer, unlike the civil engineer, may be expected to create his road instantaneously. War will not wait on legal niceties.
The principle of driving on, don't let yourself be stopped, get on, get round, get through, get over. And I walked into this German farmhouse, Lieutenant Jones, Royal Engineers, and I said, you've got 15 minutes to get out. I'm going to blow your house up. I need it to fill that hole. Well, if anybody came into my house now and said, you've got 15 minutes to get out, I don't know what I'd do. I'd go and shoot myself probably. But these Germans, I admire them as a race. They had every stick of furniture out of the house, all their possessions, and they even had the doors off the hinges. In fact, it took my sappers about 25 minutes to put the charges in. Then we blew up the house, then we bulldozed into the hole, and then the advance continued.